A foreigner mocked the royal guard's accent, thinking his insults would go unanswered. But one swift move and a combat-hardened lesson left him humiliated in front of the entire crowd. Here's how it unfolded. Before we continue, let us know in the comments below where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow at the same time we'll bring you another incredible story showcasing the bravery and discipline of the Royal Guard. You won't want to miss it. The late morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Buckingham Palace as Julian Blackwood assumed his post, the weight of his ceremonial rifle familiar after years of service. His scarlet tunic gleamed in the autumn light, each brass button polished to mirror shine. A reflection of the dedication that had earned him not just this prestigious position, but 2 tours in Afghanistan and a distinguished service record. The usual crowd of tourists had gathered, their excited chatter and camera clicks forming a familiar backdrop to his duty. But among the respectful observers and curious children, one voice cut through the pleasant atmosphere like a rusty blade. "Well, would you look at this circus?" The words carried a thick Eastern European accent, dripping with derision. "Standing there like some puppet, ready to say, 'Good day, Governor,' for the cameras, yes?" Viktor Dragovich moved through the crowd with the aggressive confidence of someone used to intimidating others. His expensive tracksuit and heavy gold chains marked him as new money, the kind earned in ways best not examined too closely. Back in Belgrade, his reputation ensured people cleared a path when he walked. Here in London, he expected no less. "You little girl," he called out to a child taking photos with her mother. "Want to hear something funny? These guards, they practice their stupid British accent more than their marching." His laugh was harsh, designed to draw attention. "Bet this one spent hours in mirror. Hello, Pip Pip. Cheerio." Several tourists backed away, recognizing the dangerous edge in Victor's voice. A pair of elderly British women exchanged worried glances before hurrying past, their afternoon plans for photographing the palace forgotten. But Victor wasn't interested in their discomfort. His pale blue eyes had fixed on Guard Blackwood with predatory focus. "Look at him, standing so proud," Victor announced to his 2 companions, both wearing similar tracksuits and sporting builds that suggested more time spent in fighting rings than gyms. "Thinking his fancy uniform and perfect posture makes him special." He took a step closer, deliberately invading the space that protocol and common decency should have protected. "Bet he practices his posh accent every morning, trying to hide whatever common little town spat him out." Guard Blackwood remained motionless, his eyes fixed forward with the discipline of someone who had faced far worse than schoolyard taunts. But there was something in his bearing, a subtle tension, visible only to those who knew what to look for, that suggested this particular guard might have some surprises in store for anyone foolish enough to mistake discipline for weakness. The autumn breeze carried the first hint of winter's bite, ruffling Victor's gelled hair as he moved even closer to the guard. His smirk widened, revealing a gold tooth that caught the sunlight like a warning signal. "Let's see how long he can keep up this act, boys. I always enjoy teaching people about their true position in life." Victor circled Guard Blackwood like a wolf sizing up its prey, his gold chains catching the sunlight with each calculated movement. "Tell me, toy soldier," he drawled, exaggerating his own accent mockingly. "How long did it take you to learn to talk like proper English gentlemen? Must be exhausting, yes? Pretending to be something you're not." His companions spread out instinctively, flanking their leader in a practiced formation that spoke of experience in less savoury situations. The smaller one, who sported a fresh scar above his left eyebrow, pulled out his phone with a knowing grin. "Maybe we help him practice," Victor's voice carried across the courtyard, drawing unwanted attention from passing tourists. "Come on, soldier boy, say something proper British for us. Something like..." He affected an exaggerated upper-class accent. "I say, good sir, would you fancy a spot of tea?" A young couple with a guidebook quickly redirected their path, the husband's arm protectively around his wife's shoulders. But their retreat only seemed to encourage Victor's performance. "No answer? Perhaps I'm not being proper enough?" He stepped closer, his breath carrying the scent of expensive cigars and morning vodka. "Should I bow first? Or is it curtsy for the Queen's little puppet?" His companions snickered on cue, their laughter carrying an edge of practiced menace. A distinguished-looking gentleman in a tweed jacket had paused nearby, his military bearing evident in his straight spine and watchful eyes. The regimental pin on his lapel caught the light. Parachute Regiment. For those who knew how to read such things. He observed the scene with the calm assessment of someone who had seen similar situations unfold before. "You know what I think?" Victor continued, his smile never reaching his cold eyes. "I think, under all this," he gestured at the guard's immaculate uniform, "is just another common boy playing dress-up. Probably practiced in mirror for hours, must sound posh, must stand straight, must pretend to be important. Nah. His larger companion moved closer to the guard's left, completing their triangular formation. "Boss, always good at seeing through people's acts," he rumbled, his own accent thicker than Victor's. "Never wrong about someone's true quality." Victor's face lit up with cruel amusement. "Ah, you hear that? Even Dmitri knows. And he's not exactly Oxford material, yes?" He leaned in closer to the guard, his voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Tell me, soldier, was it hard learning to hide whatever backwater accent you were born with? Did they make you take special classes? How to sound like you belong at Buckingham Palace for dummies?" The gentleman in tweed had been joined by another observer, an older woman whose ramrod-straight posture and stern expression marked her as a former military nurse. They exchanged knowing glances, their presence adding silent weight to the growing tension in the courtyard. Guard Blackwood remained motionless, his discipline unshaken by the escalating provocations. But there was something in his eyes now, a subtle hardening that someone more observant than Victor might have recognized as warning signs. The same look that had preceded necessary violence in far-off places where Queen's guards proved they were far more than ceremonial figures. "Still nothing?" Victor's voice took on a sharper edge. "Come on, show us your best British accent. Or maybe," his smile turned uglier, "you need some motivation to find your voice." The autumn wind picked up, carrying scattered leaves across the courtyard like nature's own warning signals. But Victor, too focused on his chosen target, failed to notice how the atmosphere had shifted, how the guard's stillness had transformed from ceremonial to predatory, how the watching veterans had subtly adjusted their stances. For someone who prided himself on reading people, he was about to miss the most important signals of all. "You want to know what I find most funny about these guards?" Victor announced, raising his voice to ensure the growing crowd could hear. "They think standing still makes them strong. That fancy uniform and proper accent makes them superior." He pulled a cigarette from a gold case, deliberately lighting it in the restricted area. "Back home we have a word for men who dress up and play pretend, but perhaps too impolite for such refined company." The smoke drifted toward Guard Blackwood's face, but his expression remained unchanged. Years of military service had taught him to endure far worse than second-hand smoke and cheap provocations. Each insult rolled off his immaculate uniform like morning dew, leaving no trace on his professional bearing. "Boss," Dmitri rumbled, shifting his weight with practiced menace. "Maybe he's deaf, or perhaps English lessons didn't include how to respond to simple questions." The implied threat in his tone was clear. They were used to people answering when spoken to. The gentleman in tweed had been joined by two more observers, their military bearing unmistakable. One wore a discreet Special Air Service pin on his lapel, while the other's campaign medals were visible under his open jacket. They maintained their distance, but watched with the focused attention of men accustomed to assessing threats. Victor took a long drag from his cigarette before flicking ash toward the guard's polished boots. "You know what I think?" He blew smoke directly into Blackwood's face. "I think, under that bearskin cap, is just another council estate boy who learned to talk proper. Probably practiced in front of mirror. Water bottle, not wear bowl." His mockery of working-class British accents drew cruel laughter from his companions. "Tell me, soldier," Victor continued, his voice dripping with contempt, "did Mummy and Daddy save up to send you to proper school? To learn how to hide where you really come from?" He circled closer like a shark scenting blood. "Or did you learn it here? Special classes for guards. How to pretend you're not common trash." The former military nurse had pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the keypad. But the SAS veteran shook his head slightly. They recognized something in Guard Blackwood's bearing that Victor, for all his street smarts, had missed entirely. "Still nothing?" Victor's smile twisted uglier. "Maybe we need to help you find your voice, yes? Where I come from, even mutes learn to speak when properly encouraged." He dropped his cigarette, deliberately grinding it out on the ceremonial grounds. "Your precious accent won't help you much when—" "Sir," a quiet voice cut through Victor's tirade. The tweed-clad gentleman had stepped forward, his tone carrying the weight of authority. "You might want to reconsider your current course of action." Victor's head snapped around, eyes narrowing at the interruption. "Oh, and who might you be, old man? Another one who thinks proper accent makes him important." "Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, retired," the man replied calmly, "and I'm suggesting for your own welfare that you've gravely misread this situation." Victor's laugh was sharp and dismissive. "Lieutenant Colonel? Very impressive. Tell me, does everyone in this country think titles and proper speech make them untouchable?" He turned back to Guard Blackwood, voice hardening. "You see, all the same, hiding behind ranks and accents and uniforms, but strip that away." He moved close enough that his next words were almost a whisper. "And what's left? Just another common boy, playing soldier." The afternoon sun had shifted, casting longer shadows across the courtyard. Guard Blackwood's shadow stretched behind him like a dark promise, while Victor's danced and distorted with his agitated movements. The contrast was striking. One man standing firm in his duty, the other circling with increasing desperation to prove his perceived superiority. The watching veterans exchanged knowing glances. They recognized the signs. The subtle shift in the guard's bearing, the almost imperceptible tension in his grip on the ceremonial rifle. They had seen that same contained power before, in places where Queen's Guards proved exactly how uncommon they truly were. Victor, blind to these warnings, prepared to escalate his performance. "You know what really makes me laugh?" Victor's voice had taken on a dangerous edge, all pretense of humour gone. "Standing here guarding what? Some old buildings with your fancy accent and shined boots." He moved directly in front of Guard Blackwood, close enough that their shadows merged on the courtyard stones. "Let's test how well they taught you to speak proper English, yes?" Without warning, Victor's hand shot out, fingers grasping the front of the guard's immaculate tunic. The crowd gasped, several tourists backing away rapidly. Even Dmitri looked uncomfortable. Touching the guards was strictly forbidden, a line even they hadn't planned to cross. "Come on, soldier boy," Victor snarled, his gold tooth catching the light like a warning beacon. "Say something proper British. Show us what all those speaking lessons bought." His fingers tightened on the scarlet fabric, threatening to wrinkle the pristine uniform. "Or maybe we find out what accent comes out when you're not playing dress-up." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison took a step forward, but the SAS veteran caught his arm. They could see what Victor couldn't. The subtle shift in Guard Blackwood's stance, the way his fingers had adjusted their grip on the ceremonial rifle, small changes that spoke volumes to those who knew the signs. Still nothing? Victor released the tunic with a contemptuous shove. All that training to sound proper, and now you can't even speak? He turned to his audience, arms spread wide. You see? They teach them to stand still, teach them to talk proper, but they can't teach them real strength. The former military nurse had moved closer to the palace gates, her expression grim. She'd seen that look before. In combat hospitals where wounded soldiers maintained their discipline until the exact moment it needed to break. Victor's hand moved again, this time toward the guard's bearskin cap. Maybe we help you remember your real voice, yes? Take off this silly hat. See what common little boy is hiding underneath. His fingers brushed the edge of the ceremonial headgear. Bet you don't sound so posh when... The shift was imperceptible to most observers, a minute tightening of Guard Blackwood's jaw, a barely noticeable adjustment of his weight. But to the watching veterans, it was like seeing a safety catch being released. "What's wrong, soldier?" Victor's voice dropped lower, meant for the guard's ears alone. "Afraid we'll hear your real accent. Afraid everyone will know you're just another council estate boy playing at being important." His hand moved to grab the cap. "Let's find out what you're really..." The ceremonial rifle's movement was so swift it seemed to blur in the autumn light. One moment it was held at the guard's shoulder. The next, its polished stock had intercepted Victor's reaching hand with mechanical precision. Not violent, not aggressive, just an immovable object meeting a very stoppable force. Victor jerked back, more surprised than hurt. His face contorted with rage as he realized his performance had been interrupted. "Oh, so now you want to play? Finally found some courage behind that proper accent?" His companions moved closer, hands slipping into jacket pockets. But something in Guard Blackwood's bearing made them hesitate. The stillness that had seemed ceremonial moments ago had transformed into something else. The contained power of a predator choosing its moment. "You think that toy rifle makes you brave?" Victor's voice rose, anger overwhelming his usual calculated control. "Think it makes you better than me? I've broken men bigger than you, made them beg in whatever gutter accent they were born with." He stepped forward again, but this time there was no ceremony in Guard Blackwood's response. The rifle's movement was precise, professional, exactly the kind of control taught not for palace duty, but for combat zones where Queen's Guards proved their true capabilities. Victor found himself staring down the barrel of a weapon, held by hands that had clearly done this before, and not just for show. The guard's eyes, previously fixed forward, now met his with a focus that spoke of experience far beyond palace grounds. "You want to hear my real accent?" Guard Blackwood's voice was quiet, measured, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume to command attention. "Why don't we discuss that somewhere more private?" The accent was pure received pronunciation, but there was steel beneath the polish. The kind forged in places where fancy speech meant nothing, and actions meant everything. The courtyard had gone completely silent. Even the tourists' cameras had lowered, their owners sensing they were witnessing something beyond the usual palace spectacle. The movement was fluid, practiced. The kind of precision that comes not from ceremonial drilling, but from combat experience. In one seamless motion, Guard Blackwood's left hand shot out, catching Victor's collar, while his right maintained perfect control of the rifle. The grip was textbook military, efficient, controlling, and completely impossible to break without proper training. "Let me explain something." Blackwood's voice remained measured, professional, but there was an edge to it now that made Victor's companions take several steps back. "This accent you're so fixated on, I learned it in Sandhurst Military Academy between combat training sessions, the same place I learned exactly how to deal with threats to the crown." Victor's bravado crumbled as he found himself expertly maneuvered against the palace railings. His feet struggled to find purchase on the courtyard stones, his expensive trainers sliding against centuries-old rock that had witnessed countless similar lessons. "But since you're so interested in accents," Blackwood continued, his grip neither tightening nor loosening, just maintaining perfect control, "let me share something. Before Sandhurst, I grew up in Newcastle. Proper Geordie accent, would you believe?" The professional tone never wavered, even as he adjusted his hold to counter Victor's attempt to break free. "2 tours in Afghanistan taught me that accents don't matter much when you're keeping your mates alive under heavy fire." Victor's hand swung wildly, a street fighter's desperate move that Blackwood avoided with almost casual ease. The guard's response was immediate, clinical. A precise manipulation of leverage that left Victor gasping, his gold chains tangled and his previously immaculate tracksuit dishevelled. "You see," Blackwood's voice remained calm, as if he were delivering a historical tour rather than subduing an aggressor. "The Queen's Guard isn't about accents or appearances. Every man who wears this uniform has earned it through combat service, specialised training, and a dedication you couldn't begin to comprehend." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison had moved closer, not to intervene, but to ensure the gathering crowd maintained a respectful distance. The SAS veteran stood ready, his experienced eyes tracking Victor's companions, who seemed increasingly unsure about their role in the unfolding scene. "The uniform you mocked," Blackwood continued, adjusting his grip as Victor made another futile attempt to break free. "Each button is polished with the same discipline that keeps soldiers alive in combat zones. The posture you ridiculed, learned through years of service, not in finishing school." His voice took on a harder edge. "And this toy rifle you mentioned, I qualified as a marksman with its operational equivalent before earning the right to stand guard here." Victor's face had lost its arrogant sneer, replaced by the dawning realization that he had catastrophically misread the situation. His next wild swing was met with a precise counter that left him pressed against the railings, his gold tooth no longer catching any light. "Here's what's going to happen." Blackwood's voice dropped lower, meant only for Victor's ears. "You're about to learn that the Queen's Guard isn't a tourist attraction. We're active duty soldiers who choose to honour centuries of tradition while maintaining the combat skills that keep people like you safe in your beds at night." The guard's grip shifted slightly, causing Victor to inhale sharply. It wasn't painful. Guard Blackwood was too professional for that, but it carried the unmistakable message that it could be if necessary. "The accent you're hearing now," Blackwood continued, his received pronunciation perfect even in these circumstances. "It's real, just as real as my Geordie accent, just as real as the combat experience that's currently keeping you from making an even bigger mistake." His eyes locked onto Victor's with sniper's focus, because believe me, sir, if I were to revert to my childhood accent right now, you wouldn't find it nearly as amusing as you imagined. Victor's companions had backed away completely now, their phones forgotten, as they watched their leader being systematically dismantled by the man they'd mistaken for a ceremonial statue. The afternoon sun cast their shadows across the courtyard, one long and distorted, the other maintaining perfect military bearing even in this unorthodox situation. "Now," Blackwood's voice carried the authority of every drill sergeant who'd ever commanded respect, "you're going to learn about something else we teach at Sandhurst." His grip adjusted with mechanical precision. "It's called facing consequences." What followed was a masterclass in military control techniques. Each movement was measured, professional, and completely impossible to counter without similar training. Victor found himself expertly maneuvered into a position that left him no choice but to comply, his previous arrogance replaced by the kind of respect that comes from direct experience with superior force. The watching veterans nodded in approval. They recognized the techniques, the same ones taught to soldiers who needed to control situations without causing unnecessary harm. Victor, however, was learning about them firsthand, his expensive tracksuit collecting dust from stones that had witnessed centuries of similar lessons. As the palace security approached, Guard Blackwood released Victor with the same precise control that had characterized the entire encounter. The would-be bully stumbled, his tracksuit dusty and his dignity in far worse condition than his designer clothes. "The police will be here shortly," Blackwood stated, his bearing returning to ceremonial perfection. "I trust you'll enlighten them about your opinions on accents and proper speech." His rifle resumed its position at his shoulder, every movement, regulation perfect. Victor, attempting to salvage what remained of his pride, straightened his gold chains with trembling fingers. You can't." "Actually, he can," Lieutenant Colonel Harrison interjected, his tone carrying decades of command experience. "Assaulting a member of the Queen's Guard is a serious offence, though I dare say you've learned that rather thoroughly." Victor's companions had already begun their retreat, their phones nowhere in sight. The former military nurse allowed herself a small smile. She'd seen enough combat hospitals to know the difference between serious injuries and wounded pride. This clearly was the latter. "One final thing," Blackwood's voice cut through Victor's attempt to regain his composure. "The next time you feel compelled to judge someone by their accent or appearance, remember this moment. Remember that beneath this ceremonial uniform stands a combat veteran who earned every syllable of his speech, every button of his uniform, and every right to stand guard over these grounds." Two police officers arrived, their expressions suggesting this wasn't their first time dealing with someone who'd underestimated the Queen's Guard. As they led Victor away, his previously aggressive stance had deflated into something far less impressive. "Typical," the SAS veteran muttered to his colleagues. "They never learn that the uniform represents more than ceremony until it's demonstrated personally." Guard Blackwood had resumed his post, his bearing as immaculate as if the entire incident had never occurred. The only evidence of the confrontation was a slight scuff on the courtyard stones where Victor had learned his lesson about judging books by their covers, or soldiers by their accents. The afternoon sun continued its arc across the London sky, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. Tourists resumed their photos, children pointed and waved, and the age-old tradition of the Queen's Guard continued unbroken. But those who had witnessed the incident walked away with a deeper understanding of what stood behind the ceremonial facade. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison lingered a moment longer, watching as Guard Blackwood maintained his vigilant watch. "Proper form," he commented to no one in particular. "In every sense of the word." With a knowing smile, he turned and walked away, leaving the guard to his duty. A duty that had just been demonstrated to involve far more than simply standing still and looking decorative. The gold tooth that had fallen from Victor's mouth during his lesson lay forgotten among the ancient stones, its gleam dulled by the shadow of real authority. What would you have done in Guard Blackwood's position? Should he have responded sooner, or was his timing perfect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed someone being humbled after underestimating a person in uniform? Tell us your story in the comments section. If you enjoyed this powerful reminder about respecting our servicemen and women, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that show the real strength behind ceremonial duties. Hit that bell icon to never miss our daily uploads about the Royal Guards who protect not just palaces, but the values they represent. Check out our previous videos appearing on your screen right now to learn more about these extraordinary servicemen who stand guard over tradition, honour and respect. Until next time, remember, real strength isn't in how you speak, it's in how you act when it matters most.